Okay, so we begin with the discussion around the EFCC. There's a new leadership. A lot of people are looking at, the very young person who has taken over the helms of affairs, and expectations are high. Of
Certainly.
course, there are concerns in some quarters, talking about some allegations. Of course, they tried to talk about them at that confirmation session. But what exactly should the new EFCC boss be doing now? Those are the issues that we are going to raise this morning. And we have with us in the studio a legal practitioner and president committee for the defense of human rights, Mr. Malaki Ugumadu. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm delighted to be here, except to say that I'm the immediate past president of CDHR.
Of CDHR. Okay, thank you so much.
Dr.
And,
is the president.
of course, we also have Mr. Debo Adeniro, the chairman coalition against corrupt leaders, is joining us via Zoom. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay, so since I'm with you now, let me just ask you, what is your take on this new EFCC leadership?
Thank you very much. Actually, I have to correct what you call our name. We have rebranded since 2016 to Center for Anticorruption and Open Leadership. One, the new chairman, of course, he has been found, has a lot of work in hand. But first and foremost, he needs to declare his success. Because if you want to come to EPC, you have to come with clean hands. Two, he needs to prove those who accuse him of allegations of economic and financial crimes when he was in Port Harcourt. He needs to prove them wrong. It is not enough to say it at the clearing interview with the Senate that he has been cleared. Not only will he be cleared, he has to be seen to have been cleared. And that will not be done by himself or even the EFCC that is now leading. It has to be, the clearing has to be done by a third party, maybe ICPC or any other agency that is capable of doing such thing. If that allegation is not properly cleared, especially at the level of the court of competent jurisdiction, it will still hang on him like a sort of Damocles. Then he needs to also detach himself from the apron of the Minister of Justice. You know that it is the same Minister of Justice who wrote the petition that led to the investigation of his predecessor, Ibrahim Magu. And from the rumors that is driving, we believe that they, even if they are not cousins, as they seem to assume, they are from the same state. So you need to prove to us that the petition written by the Minister of Justice was not meant to clear the way for him to occupy that office. And you know, it has not been, it has been a lot lost between the minister and the chairman of EFCC. Usually, the minister wants to control everything that is done by the anti-graft agency. And the anti-graft agencies are not usually comfortable with that. Knowing that the minister is a politician, he will always want to protect those people that are with him, maybe in the same party and so on and so forth. And that is why many of the ministers took or still take delight in entering knowledge to secure on several cases that are being pursued by anti-graft agencies. They don't like that. Now that the chairman is even closer and far younger than the minister, a lot of people think that the chairman may become errand boy for the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation. So you need to clear that. Then they have to end the dichotomy, or maybe iron out the dichotomy between the operatives of the EFCC, those who have police training background and those who don't. And of course, there have been a lot of discussions about favoritism and even politics within the EFCC itself, where a number of his colleagues, not necessarily those that are in course one of EFCC institutes with them, even those who believe that they have better training than he does, those politics and competition and jealousy will be there. So he needs to humble himself, but be firm and ensure that no case is left uninvestigated. No case is left unprosecuted diligently. And one of the ways to prove that it's not tied to the apron of the minister is to ensure that there is thorough investigation on all those cases, like the one of MTN, like the one of Malibu, like the one of Rashid Mena, and a lot of other things. We are delighted that he has talent qualifications that, just like his predecessors, just as he's now younger. And, well, I wouldn't know if that is an added advantage, because experience is not something
Mr. Adeniro,
you can. Yes, yes.
Yeah, we'll come back to you. Let's hear from Mr. Ogumadu here. He's drawn up a whole list of expectations for
a to-do list.
To-do list from Mr. Bauer. He has said that he should declare his assets first. What is it for you?
Well, that's a statutory requirement, and I like the way he anchored it. If you come into equity, you must do equity. More to it is that Nigeria has been characterized in recent years by a lot of misgivings regarding our status as a clean country, in quote. And therefore, if you are going to take on that agency that drives a cardinal aspect of a government, the fight against corruption, the campaign against corruption, then you must not just be clean, you must be seen to be clean. That requires some added levels of transparency, accountability, and so on and so forth. No less in such instance where preceding your appointment, there have been controversies around your activities or perceived activities while you were heading the zonal office in Port Harcourt. But in this time and age, and that has been my response while I was confronted by the media, where you have citizen journalism, where everyone runs with any idea that runs amok in his or her head. Allegations are very common and very free to make. What is important is the quality and content or body of evidence that you have to establish that allegation. But to head EFCC is like to live above board. And that is the expectation, that is what the law requires, and that is what must be seen to be done. But
so he has to live above board. I think you just please hold on your thoughts. So we'll continue from where you stop after this break. Welcome back. Mr. Ogumadu, you stopped at where you were saying the new EFCC chairman should live above board.
correct.
So
I think it's applicable to everyone who superintends such an agency because it's sensitive and the focus will be on you. But I'm happy he responded to that question. I'm also satisfied that in a country such as ours, we have a body, an arm of government that has a responsibility to screen which is what happened. A body of over 100 persons would have done, in my view, some investigation, some inquiries into that allegation, and then come up with that. Besides, before such appointments, there are security checks, background checks on such persons, and we'll leave it at that. I'm in two minds going into that because quite a number of rumors fly around. Now, that is not to discountenance the merit of what is there, but as it stands today, we have a new sheriff in town.
So one of the things that comes to mind with all of the things that you and Mr. Adeniran has said is that sometimes it will seem like, you know, these issues are thrown out just to discredit ahead of time. If the issue is to discredit ahead of time, it would perhaps also, it could, okay, maybe I should make it a question for you. How significant is that effort or attempt to discredit this new EFCC chairman at fighting corruption itself?
Let us put it this way. Let us understand that that agency represents a cardinal aspect of a government agenda, government policy, a government trust, that is fight against corruption, just as they declared provision of jobs and so on and so forth. And you have an opposing political party. You have those who have completely got disenchanted with this government. And you also have a country which is largely defined by corrupt activities. So what do? Even in our small circles, I have been a victim of reckless allegations, just so that you attack that which he has as a selling point, the credibility. And given that our country is now inundated with tales and woes of corrupt activities, even world over, regarding the corruption perception index and so on and so forth, it's only going to be given that once you throw that in the air, a lot of tractions will be created. But I tell you what, it is also in the midst of such allegations that the star shines, because you are not just able to discredit that, you are able to prove almost beyond doubt that your focus is on cleaning up the country and then taking on those whose activities it is to perpetuate this corruption, either in the perception of the people or indeed in the act. So that brings me back to what he must do. Good 18, he has precedents, he has predecessors. As I was discussing with you, he's about the fifth, from Nuhu Ribadu to Farida to my friend Lamude to the toughest of them all, in my view, Mago, and then himself. And he has been in there from 2005. EFCC was created in 2003. Now, he is also the first non-police man to ascend onto that office at his relatively young age, 40, who was about 43. The passion, the enthusiasm, the determination to prove the point clearly is there. I know him personally. But he must not discountenance what it is that has become that office. Sensitive, very, very, if you say slippery.
I was going to give you that word.
Deliberately focused on. And you would have these people who are clearly, whose life is built on corruption, are already an organized body in this country. And they do everything to coordinate their activities in a way to undermine that office. Once you are brought down, the whole system is brought down, the government is affected, and the people are left.
So what exactly will he need to do
to
address that particular issue that you
First is to be very conscious of it. Like I said, there are precedents, many, not one, all of them, all his predecessors have had cause to become victim of this fight back. In short, in the case of Nuhu, his life was on the line. We learned of Nuhu went to school as at that time because it became clear that this guy must be taken out. He got caught in the political web of that moment, from the Bori to Yaradua time. And then Farida came in soon after. It was Lamude, all in controversies as they tried to do their best. In the case of Magu, up to today, no one can say clearly what exactly is his fate. What has become clear, however, is that the country has moved on.
So with the consciousness, what does he need to do?
So first is that he clearly will tap and leverage on the experience he has had.
Okay.
That gives him a leverage, considering that some of his predecessors were pioneer actors.
Yeah.
Nuhu in particular, up to Lamude. Second is that he must be able to elevate the act of transparency and accountability. There is a measure of accountability that you bring to bear on your activities. You will have the buy-in of the Nigerian people, and that is much more important than whatever the Attorney General or the President does. There are moments in this country when even objective civil society organizations resolved that there was the need to assist the anti-corruption agencies in fighting corruption.
Let me ask Mr. Adeniro. So the task is right before the new EFCC chairman to ensure that he is above board. But then it's not just going to take away the allegations. He's going to have to do his job in the middle of all of these. Now, if there is so much focus on trying to elevate himself as opposed to doing his job, wouldn't that be a distraction?
Well, those who appointed him, actually, those who appointed him seem to consider all of those things they should have considered before they appointed. And they actually raised the controversy that surrounds his appointment to beyond the rule. For example, why the hurried promotion I had to give on to him? It's like an afterthought, placing the carts before the horse. Since they started considering appointing him, they should know that he needed to be on a great level that is beyond 13, where the appointment came to meet him. And all of these investigations, Malaki talked about background check. They could have done the background check. They could have sampled the opinion of those of us in the civil populace. They could have come up with the watertight, defense of their nominee before he's nominated. He needed to clear his name. No matter what is going to cost us, I think it's better than somebody of that status who should live above board to come within a controversy. Yes, it is true that all of the past chairmen of EFCC have been enmeshed in one controversy or the other. That was clearly noted by people as corruption fighting back. Because when they came in, apart from the outgoing acting or the last acting chairman, Ibrahim Magu, who came in amidst controversy generated by the DSS report on him. And of course, there were 2 reports of DSS on him. So that was the beginning of his own controversy. Others got into position when Madam Farida too came in, amidst certain controversy. But it doesn't, such controversy didn't relate, wasn't related to their work, the work that they have done, places where they have worked before, and their qualifications. And like I said, wisdom never runs out of fashion. I don't believe all of these not too young to rule is just absolute the way it is being touted. This yes is course one of EFCC Institute. There are several other people in that course one, and the institute is also relatively young, and you can compare that with existing institutes like the police college and the rest of them. So I still believe that EFCC still needs the expertise that will come from an older institution that is almost at par with the university, if it's not at par already, that have had experience in working with, in other clients. That if you are saying that somebody, because it's been in EFCC for so long, there are a few people who have been in law enforcement agencies for so long, and they know all the nooks and crannies of how corruption crimes are committed, more than those who came in so newly. So basically, that controversy has been generated by those who appointed him. Now, if he clears that, all the allegations against him, he needs to also ensure, apart from what I said earlier, that there is training and retraining of his officers, especially the investigators and the prosecutors, where there will be thorough investigation and there will be diligent prosecution towards getting conviction.
But Mr. Adeniro, if you just a moment, if you don't mind me asking, you've chronicled something quite significant here, and I think I'll ask Mr. Ogumadu here in the studio first of all about that. He's chronicled something earlier, and that's the fact that virtually every EFCC chairman before the new one was immersed in a controversy. In fact, he even cited that one or two of them came into office in controversial circumstances, which hung around their necks all through their, stay in office, which was, in a way, a distraction because while the fight against corruption is going on, the noose, so to speak, on their necks is still there. It would, in a way, kind of undermine the fight itself, focusing the fight against corruption on one person as opposed to being an institutional responsibility, not an individual one.
I think it's important you raised this point because that will enable me address some critical aspects of this discourse that I think is not featuring prominently in the entire debate. The first is that the commission is an institution, not just an institution of government, indeed created by an enabling act of the National Assembly. It brings me back to a debate we have had about the contradiction of a government instituting an institution to fight corruption in the same government. I don't know if you understand what I mean. To what extent can an institution of government fight corruption in government? That is not to say there is no corruption outside government. But if in our climb, the much we have seen, even the aggregation of the perception index that we talk about is largely drawn from the activities of government. To what extent can an institution of government deal with corruption in government? That is at one level, and I'm not sure we can go into that debate. Secondly, Bawa is but one out of almost 20-something members of the commission. And the law is that the chairman and members of the commission, except ex-official members, shall be appointed by the president, subject to the confirmation of the Senate. I am referencing Section 2, Subsection 3 of the Establishment Act. That is the EFCC Establishment Act 2004. So what does that tell you? It tells you that the more we focus on the chairman, which is very, very important because he's like the driving force. You have the secretary of the commission. You have other members drawn from very sensitive agencies of government, including CBN, NID, NDIC, the army, all through. So what is the quality and content of these other persons? Because as we have seen, look at the government itself. Buhari Oshibajo talks about anti-corruption. We don't hear that vibration at the same level with the same zeal and zest from other members of the same team. In the same vein, if we focus all our energy on Bawa and forget that Bawa is just one out of about 20-something, and then refuse to do anything regarding even the morale in the commission, all of what is happening now has implications. You need to know what it takes to truly fight corruption within the limits of the powers that they have in Nigeria. You must clearly show that you are ready to give your life. I asked Magu myself as the national president of CDHR when he had cause to visit the group. And I put a direct question to him. We have seen how your predecessors fared in office. To what extent are you ready to confront this crisis of this country? And the reply I got was that even if it will mean that if he left this office this moment, he's removed from office. I don't know if you understand. That is to say, I am ready to go the whole hog. And you know, whether we like it or not, for as long as corrupt activities are high up there in our society, no matter how determined you are likely going to face as equal opposition, confrontation, distraction from this organized body of persons whose livelihood and existence hovers around corrupt activities. Because essentially, it has become a way of life, and for as long as you pose a challenge to their existence, for that long you will get the repercussion of what you are doing.
Okay,
and what is more, sir, I'm going to round up by saying that one point we have not mentioned is that we must not discountenance the place of the law in the fight against corruption.
There are a string of laws, Mr. Gumadu. There are a string of laws.
And I'm talking about respect for rule of law and obedience of court
We'll come
orders.
to that because because the EFCC operates through certain established laws, of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But we'll come to some of those other details when we come from this break. Stay with us. Well, thank you for joining us, for staying with us. So, Mr. Gumadu, you were trying to talk about the rule of law angle. So, what law are we talking about here? Because we have quite a few that the EFCC uses as instruments of its operation. The Advanced Fee Fraud Act, the Miscellaneous, Law Act, the Cybercrime Act, so many of them like that. So, when you're talking about the rule of law, there is a law. As you said earlier, there would be no need for EFCC if these laws themselves were effective. Now that we have EFCC, does it change the effectiveness or a lack of it, of these laws?
Now that there is EFCC and the EFCC is functional, what becomes paramount is that the EFCC must operate within the confines of that law.
Okay.
If it does or carries out its activities outside the confines of that law, those hawks I talked about will leverage on that to make nonsense of their efforts.
What has been the trajectory?
The trajectory is that we have seen quite a number of outcry on limited respect and obedience to court orders and the rule of law. And what do I mean by that? The activities of the EFCC span from investigation to prosecution to forfeiture to and so on and so forth. On the issue of investigation, which culminates into arrest, there have been serious outcry regarding abuse of the rights of the citizens of the country. In short, we have had calls in my group to collaborate in trainings. That is to say, much as we support what you are doing, those activities of yours must be, confined within the ambits of the law. What is the law? The law is that no person should be arbitrarily arrested or detained beyond the permissible period of time. The implication of that is that if you're going to take on any suspect, you must have discreetly conducted those investigators of yours up to the point when you are ready to prosecute, which will mean that at the point when you are arrested, it's either you are ready to grant bail or you are ready to move straight to court for the prosecution.
You're not arresting first and shopping
for evidence.
The evidence.
If you do that, you arm the suspect who may indeed be a criminal. Although it doesn't lie in your mouth to call him a criminal. It is only by the declaration of a competent court of law. But the issue is that in the way and manner they have, well, in some cases, in most cases, as I can say, it is in their determination to get to the point where they will secure conviction. They overreach themselves by committing some of these mistakes. It's not in all the cases, but in some of those few cases, particularly high-profile cases, the suspects have leverage on that to refocus the campaign, such that if we're talking about a pure criminal activities, the attention will be dragged away from that and focus on the constitutionality of the arrest you have carried out. And that could be taking the whole hog. So at the end of the day, you spend years pursuing the shadow instead of the substance. These are the things. So I believe that Bauer, having been in the system and having had cause to engage at several levels, not just within, he's even a trainer. He's an instructor.
Yes.
With sufficient background in investigation, should be able to, to leverage on all of this and then come up with a strategy that clearly distinguishes his style from what others have done. Without losing the steam, because you need some very firm, resolved position to be able to fight corruption in Nigeria.
Let's go to Mr. Deniro. It was interesting seeing the new EFCC chairman, reciting the pledge, pledging to Nigeria, I pledge to Nigeria, my country, be faithful, loyal, and honest. So how thin is that line between the loyalty, for instance, to the president that appointed him and that pledge to Nigeria?
Thank you very much. First, we need to look at, because Malaki talked about the commission having several people focused on that. If you look at a pack of lions led by a sheep, it's going to be like toothless as the sheep itself. You have a pack of sheep led by a lion. It's going to be as first fighting as lion because he's the leader that is the face of the organization. So when people mystify this, view the institution, don't look at personality, it's a first. To the extent that if the face of the organization is faulty, then the organization will be seen as faulty. And besides, the commission, the board of the commission has not been constituted for so many years. So it is the chairman that sits at top of it, and it's the chairman that speaks for the commission. And it depends on how he still his points that will determine whether or not the commission will be doing well. That leads me to your question, whether he can detach himself from the apron of those who appointed him. Of course, it's like a fact that
I think technology is in the way. Mr. Ogumadi, you want to look at that aspect of it. The new EFCC chairman has pledged to Nigeria. but he also has someone that appointed him. How thin is that line?
The rope, they say, does not make the monk. I wish it's all about pledges. If it were, those who were dissatisfied with Trump's behavior would not have felt that terribly bad. Now, the test of the pudding is in the eating. We've heard about the pledge. We've heard about that robust resume. We've heard about his experiences. We've heard about all of those. Now, in the operations, Bawa, as young as he is, again, I'm sure many people will be scandalized that we're all focused on a 40-year-old man, describing him as a young man, as though the Clintons and Obamas were above that when they took on the reins of leading the most sophisticated countries in the world. So Bawa has a duty to the generation he belongs, who are now excited. He has a duty to the memory of Bawa as a human being, the commission, to establish a new paradigm, which is that my loyalty will be to the government and the people of this country, beyond my appointers. We are not going to sit down here and trivialize the enormity of the question you have asked. Quite frankly, even from the way he behaved when he met the president, which was shown on you, you could see that he was conscious that he was meeting the president, let alone the operations of it. But he also spoke about what he could do differently, and that is that he will bring all of those experiences he has. He will be able to show that he is out to solve the corruption problem in Nigeria. But I think that to be able to do that, he needs the courage of his conviction. It is sufficient to make those avowals, but it is much more important to, keep faith with those pronouncements in the thick and thin of his operations.
Let me ask.
And what I mean by that is that in coming to judgment, in exercising his discretion, in taking those sensitive decisions, you must rise above the contradictions I talked about, which is the contradiction of a state creating institution to fight corruption within itself, and focus on the survival of the nation that even created those institutions.
Okay. Mr. Adeniro, the EFCC is just one of a good number of anti-corruption agencies that we have in the country. The ICPC is one, the EFCC and the NFIU and a few others like that. How strong would you say the anti-corruption apparatus of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is on its own? The institutions, the collaboration, the networking, and everything, as opposed to the individuals. How strong would you say the institutions on their own and as a network, how strong would you say they are in the fight against corruption?
First and foremost, we should realize that every agency has an act of the parliament that set it up. If the holders of office in those agencies determine to make it work, they will look at the acts that set it up rather than the persons that controls the instrumentality of governance. And you have several instruments that aid, the implementation of their responsibilities within the agency they are operating. For example, you have all these BVN, TSA, school, ACTU, all of these are tools that will help anti-graft agencies, even regulatory agencies like SON, like NAFDAC, and the rest of them, to do their work without fear or favor. But there is a lot of political intervention. That is what has to be removed. And that is where I agree with Malaki that heads of these agencies need to corner, garner public will, so that the public will always support them. Because the opinion of the public does a lot of amendments to whatever the decision the authorities want to do. Remember that Nuhu Ribadu actually got his boss, the then Inspector General of Police, arrested. And he didn't mind what it would cost him. Of course, it cost him. But then it is the Nigeria that they pledged to serve, okay, with all their heart, with all the loyalty that they serve, that they should focus on, not the job. Because at the end of the day, if they lose their job and they still carry their dignity, they do not favor any political godfather while carrying out that assignment. Definitely, their name will still be intact. But there are a couple of agencies that one cannot vouch for. We do their work without fear or favor, without allowing the local of the office to get, to get into their head, and they misbehave in office. And if the focus is on Nigeria, definitely they will achieve the ultimate goal. And that is why we are saying that whoever is coming to equity must come with clean hands. As long as the public have reposed that level of confidence in anybody that is heading that agency, those who constitute the board can only do but little, because the head of the agency will determine what happens within the agency. All other members of the agency come from outside of the agency. After their meetings, they go their various ways. The implementations of decisions of that board will be carried out under the directive of the chairman. And like I said the other time, the board of EFCC has not been considered for so long, meaning that the chairman will see all the work in that agency comes on the chairman's table. It's not discussing with NSA, for example. It's not discussing with DSS, those who are supposed to make contribution to whatever he does. So if the man wants to succeed, he has to work in synergy with other law enforcement agencies, who will assist him with information, with intelligence agencies like DSS, like the police itself, like NSA, and other regulatory agencies that will feed it with, necessary information that will make their job easy to do. Remember that if corruption issues don't have international dimension or economic sabotage dimension, EFCC wouldn't have become necessary after ICPC. The job of EFCC will take them around the world, and they need to work hand in hand with all agencies that will facilitate their easy movement. If they are in rivalry with them, that will not help. And that has been the reason why many agencies have not been succeeding. Basically, what we are saying is that the agency should focus on its assignment as provided by the act that establishes it, and not to pander to the dictate of maybe the supervisory ministry. And as a matter of fact, effort should be made by the National Assembly to remove the umbilical cord between the anti-graft agencies and the Ministry of Justice. That have been the reason for the discordant notes that are usually sung by the two agencies of government. If you remember Michael Adwaka, you remember Mohamed Adoke, you remember even the present one, they have always been at loggerheads with head of EFCC. Why? Because the politicians in the minister want to protect politicians. Remember, most of the crimes economic and financial crimes are committed by politicians. And they want to
Mr. Adeniro, yes, most certainly, you are making, good points here. But I like to ask Mr. Ugomado if he agrees with you. I just I've done this a good number, quite a few times. Just Google a quick search of types and forms of corruption. The number one choice you are likely to have is political corruption. Incidentally, it is the political institutions that formulate the policies that become these laws, such as the EFCC Act and all of that. And now Mr. Adeniro is suggesting that we should sever the umbilical cord between the office of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice from that of the anti-graft agency, the EFCC. How's that going to work? Is it even possible?
And is it desirable? I think that should be the other arm of the question. I know we're pressed for time now, but all of these suggestions are made within the context of our historical experiences. From the Andoka to the Adoke and now Malami experience, we've seen a pattern. In short, the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights, on record, had cause to challenge Andoka regarding his interference with the EFCC of that time, and was able to itemize, collate, and publish all of the cases, particularly high-profile political cases, leading to corruption charges that were withdrawn from court, which is in exercise of his powers under Section 174 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But please go to that section. The first word used in that section, that discretionary power of the Attorney General of the Federation, replicated in the states with Attorney Generals of the state, is the power to initiate criminal prosecutions. You initiate, you withdraw, you discontinue. The first is to initiate. So the question was, how many have you initiated in relation to the number you have withdrawn? So Mr. Devo is quite right. The point is that all of these suggestions are made within the context of our history. And if we have a patriotic Attorney General, an anti-corruption person superintending the office of the Attorney General, this suggestion may be tweaked. And therefore, that's why I say, is it desirable? It is to know what is the supervisory role of the office of the Attorney General in relation to criminal prosecutions, not just by EFCC, but all prosecuting agencies, including NDLA, up to NAFDAC, EFCC, police. It is to have a coordinated approach to criminal prosecution in a way that aligns with the policies of the government. But I have not forgotten that contradiction that befalls an agency of government to deal with the corruption that you talked about that is prevalent within government circles.
Then that's a big challenge in
Big one.
itself,
Big
especially given that if any law is going to be tweaked along that line, it's the responsibility of the National Assembly.
Correct.
Made up of politicians.
Correct.
So,
not just politicians, the kind of politicians that both Obasanjo and one of the senators, I've forgotten his name, former police officer, have said that this house that we are in is populated by not just corrupt persons, but criminally minded persons.
Thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. We are hoping that, all of and some of these suggestions that have been made here this morning will be taken into consideration, even as the new EFCC leader, continues.
If they are not, we challenge them. I have cases against EFCC with all the supports I give them. Live, Federal High Court will have cases.
Thank you, legal practitioner and immediate past president of Committee for the Defense of Human Rights, Mr. Malaki Ugumadu, and of course on Zoom, joining us from Lagos, the executive chairman, Center for Anti-Corruption and Open Leadership, Mr. Debo Adeniran. Thank you so much for your thoughts this morning.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you for.
We'll be back in a moment. Just stay with us.